Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar today. We're just going to give folks 2 minutes to join, so we'll start the webinar at approximately 2:02 p.m. Eastern. All right, thanks for joining again, everyone. Today's webinar will be about driving better results out of your customer journey map. My name is Aman Bala, and I'm a VP of Product Management here at Blueprint Software. Just a little bit about me. Been with the company for about 4.5 years in various product roles within the organization, and really focused on delivering value to all of our enterprise customers across all of our verticals, including Agile planning, Agile requirements, as well as regulations and compliance as well. So we're going to go through, we got a pretty lengthy agenda today. I'll walk through it in just a second, but we'll leave questions till the end. We'll have Q&A portions. So if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the discussions area, and we'll get to them at the very end of the presentation. So our agenda for today is around focusing on customer journey mapping. Will be around discussing briefly the what and the why around customer journey mapping, the benefits you can have within your enterprise using customer journey maps, some common missteps and cues we see within our interactions with the market, how to best drive results using customer journey mapping processes. What are the various elements of customer journey maps, and really getting down to how to create one and coordinating the creation of a customer journey map within your enterprise. And then lastly, how to kick off a customer journey map and driving change. And again, we'll leave the very end for our Q&A, and we should have about 5 or 10 minutes there. So before we jump in, kind of how we see the world and what the state of the enterprise is that we're seeing from our customers as well as the market overall that markets in the enterprise are really evolving constantly. Customers are demanding faster delivery of solutions from the enterprise that better meet their changing needs. We always hear about in the press things about security issues. And so those are really table stakes, and the ability to provide reliable, secure solutions, and customers always want performance as that's top of mind. And then lastly, there's misalignment in solutions being delivered. The enterprises with their customers, there seems to be a disconnect, and as well as misalignment internally. Often we see there's misalignment between the business and IT, but this misalignment can occur throughout the organization, and you'll see a lot of that tone come out once we start talking about why customer journey mapping is so critical to alignment experience from end to end. So let's chat about customer journey maps, really the definition of what they are, and then why do we even bother creating them. So here's the what. So customer journey maps are visual models that illustrate experiences when customers interact with any organization. They assist with giving an outside-in perspective to the process of buying and consuming and getting support in regards to products and services an organization has to offer. Oftentimes we see large enterprises get caught up in I would call the inside out perspective, which is you have your perspective in terms of your process of rolling out and delivering value to the customer, but you view it in terms of how to get an operation or a tactile solution completed and rolled out to the value of the customer. So really this provides the opposite perspective. It represents value creation in the eyes of a customer, and that can be in terms of solutions, services, or processes, any way a customer can really realize value. Customer journey maps typically focus on the relationship an individual has as a customer within the organization, typically highlighting some sort of decision-making process. That decision-making process can start with the purchase or the buying process, of buying either a service or a product with your enterprise, and then normally evolves into how that customer can be retained. So creating solutions are really focused around interaction between individuals and organizations, represented in a perspective we like to call value-centered design. And there can be lots of variations on customer journey maps that can show various facets of customer experiences. Some components that are included within customer experience in the journey map, it could be things like actions, a state of mind a customer or a user is having at the point of that they have that interaction. What are their feelings during that time? What are the desired outcomes that they're looking for? What are the touch points that they have with your organization? And really important is, what are the pain points that they're having and how can they be remedied? Also, I want to get too hung up on labels on customer journey maps versus things like experience maps and service blueprints. You really want to focus how you want to show value alignment visually to engage others within your organizations in a conversation about aligning and driving change within the organizations that really focus on giving customers value. So why do we do customer journey maps? The fundamental problem within organizations is one of alignment, right? So organizations are out of sync with what people they serve actually experience, right? And so with alignment, you want to make sure that you have a customer freight line. You want to focus on the human behavior as part of the larger ecosystem. What are the individuals doing, thinking, and feeling within a given context as they interact with you and your value, your services or products you have to offer? You want to be able to illustrate multiple factors of info simultaneously. So within the user, that their perspective is around actions and thoughts and feelings and goals. And with the organization, it's around processes and objectives and metrics and what actors are interacting. You want to expose those touch points and the context of those touch points. And we'll get into a little bit of that, of the how to create customer journey maps and the components in a little bit. You also want to give a composite view of experiences in a graphical view and make a user experience tangible. It should really have little to no explanation, and customer journey maps should be intuitive and simple for anybody within your organization to understand. They should be able to stand up on their own, essentially. And they should be based on investigation and related from research and observation. The next pillar of why they're so important is that there's a need to bring organizations back into sync with market problems and customer needs. Markets and enterprises tend to diverge when enterprises become focused on innovation within process improvements, as well as driving efficiencies, and they become out of sync with their customer and market needs. Solutions are built that are detached essentially from the reality. Thirdly, teams lack a common purpose. So there's this feeling of, in large enterprises, when organizations or departments within become siloed and each department is driving to their own drumbeat or to their own goals, and customer journey maps really help to tie in that common purpose or that common goal across the organization and the business units. The next is focusing on technology or deliverables, as we want to think of it, versus experiences. And it's a short-sighted strategy. So customer journey maps essentially are compelling documents that help to invite engagements by various stakeholders. And they help to give you that outside-in perspective and the perspective of the customer and the experiences versus your internal processes. Often organizations get wrapped up in their own internal processes and forget to look at the markets they serve and deliver compelling solutions around that value delivery. And lastly, creating visualizations as shared references. So a customer journey map is a diagram of experience that serves as a tangible model to rally around or folks in your organization to allow the viewer to grasp interlocking relationships, to allow for conversations to occur versus providing outright answers and visuals. These visuals help to inform strategy and alignment, which is critical for things like lean development. The customer journey map should also help you and should be able to help you pass it around and stand on its own and really serve as a testament for all business units to drive value to the customer, no matter whether you serve the product organization, the development organization, support, account management, marketing. It really is a asset that can be valued from across the organization. So the uses, let's talk a little bit about how we use customer journey maps. Firstly, it makes products and services more relevant. This speaks to alignment, essentially. If you know what your customers' touch points are with your organization, as well as what their pain points are, you can remedy the problems that they're having and derive value from that within your products and services. As well as understanding customer loyalty along the customer journey. If you could see kind of those moments of truth or those aha moments, which folks in product and customer experience really want to obtain, you can help drive customer loyalty and make sure that that customer comes back and continues to be very loyal in that sense. As well as you want to be able to improve the customer experience and see where your shortfalls are today. And by mapping out your current state of the world, you'll be able to see where you fall short for that customer and where they're having issues and pain, and being able to remedy them, which will allow you to better engage your customer base and create a better relationship with them. And ultimately, in the end, you want to provide value that employs customers to return again. So next, we're going to talk about the benefits of customer journey maps. So the benefits of customer journey maps, firstly, are about creating an inclusive dialogue within the organization, and not really about creating the actual asset of the map itself, right? So really embrace the process. When you want to experience a product or service in a holistic way that's crossing all the organizational department lines, this is what happens. This is what your users, your customers experience, right? And so you want to allow internally for your departments to work directly with one another to facilitate conversations as well as deeper reflection around that. Second, you want to be able to build empathy, right? So you want to shift the company's perspective, right? We talk about that, providing that perspective from outside in, but it's not only that. You want your internal stakeholders to really be sensitive to your customers' needs and to what they're experiencing. And only when you walk in their shoes can you really draw that parallel to what they're thinking and feeling as they're experiencing the various touch points with your organization. And you want to provide a common big picture, right? You want to help to build consensus across all your teams. This will help to address things like alignment attrition and being siloed, right? You want to retain that big picture as resources change as well. It helps to provide a center around knowledge management and retaining that. Next, it helps you also reduce complexity and bring focus. So matching that outward and inward facing endeavors and help to bring focus and coherency within your organization. When you can bring focus like this, you can really drive results. And you want to as well just discover opportunities. So the immediacy of comprehension to provide insight into unnoticed value creation opportunities. Once you start creating customer journey maps for both your current state and your future state, you'll start to discover that you can really understand where those aha moments are for prospects and customers, and the moments of truth and how they lean on the offerings you provide to really provide value, as well as you can discover new ways to provide those aha moments. And then lastly, you want to be able to identify areas for improvement as well as expose opportunities for growth. Next, we'll talk about some common missteps. So people often make the mistake of mapping from an internal point of view and not from the customers. And when we think of this is really around the design of services or offerings. and not necessarily customer journey mapping, right? You're not developing empathy for the customer. You're not walking in their shoes per se. You're really just designing out a solution and the services, and providing those outwards. So again, that's taking an inward out approach. You want to be the second misstep we see is that folks aren't actually talking to actual customers when creating customer journey maps. You need to talk to customers to get their perspective versus just thinking you know what they experience, and creating your personas based on the conversations, that you want to create personas based on the conversations with real people and real data, and not based on internal exercises and things like demographics. It's all about creating relationships with actual customers and bringing that data back within the organization and sharing it with everyone. You also have different customers, and they are all are on different journeys and have different needs and different pains. And so vis-a-vis, they should experience things differently. And each persona should have their own map with their own different thoughts and emotions and moments of truth. They'll also evolve with time. So this isn't a one-time you create a customer journey map activity. Customer journey maps should be a living asset or artifact. Those journey maps should evolve and be revisited on a regular cadence to keep up with market and customer trends, or else the journey map as well as your organization will quickly get out of alignment or out of sync. Next, there's a need for various data points to create a comprehensive journey map. A customer interfaces with many facets of your organization, and so all those facets should be involved in the process to ensure that you're getting that complete big picture. There's normally 5 types of customer data you want to understand. You want to understand the high-level journey stages they're going through, goals and problems that they want to achieve, or problems in the sense that you want to solve, touch points with your organizations, their emotions during that time of the during that journey stage, as well as the evaluation of the experience. And there aren't inventories of touch points, including deeper insight into motivations and attitudes of customers. What makes them purchase and keep coming back to retain them? You want to make sure that your customer journey map addresses this. Next, we're going to get into the details about how to drive results. So how to drive results, you want to frame the effort clearly within your organization when creating a customer journey map. You want to determine the persona you want to create a customer journey map for and drive value for. You want to determine their point of view and their scope, what they're focused on, and ideally how you intend to use the map. You want to identify the various touch points as well as those moments of truth and focus on creating value to not only improve your operations and your offerings, but to innovate on them. You want experiences that are holistic. And so those experiences that customers can have can be actions, thoughts, or feelings. They could also be personal. They can be subjective as well as be different from persona to persona, as well as experiences can be situational. So circumstance drives experience. So you need to be able to frame all of this exclusively. Next is the point of view. So it involves the person in the customer journey map and the type of experience they're focused on. So if they're focusing on purchasing of your product, then you want to make sure that you're really taking the user or customer's point of view in that path. You want to identify the scope, which requires trade-off in breadth versus depth. So you have to ideally make the decision whether you want to tackle a high-level customer journey map or really get into the nitty-gritty details on defining a customer's journey map during a certain part of their journey. You want to be able to define, if you're doing an end-to-end experience which reveals the big picture but leaves out the details, that's fine. or you could do the vice versa. It's really up to you. You want to determine the boundaries and what kind of granularity you need. And are you focused on a discrete problem or the view of the entire system? These are some of the questions you're going to ask yourself as you determine the scope of your customer journey map. So next is you want to determine the focus, what you're going to focus on during your customer journey mapping exercise. And it depends on the actor, right? You want to make sure that if you're zeroing in on a certain pain point or a certain moment of truth, that you depict that accordingly. Customer journey maps are normally chronological, or they are chronological in nature. So you want to make sure that you set up your maps accordingly, as well as determine who will be consuming your customer journey maps. So consider your audience, and with that in mind, you should help to frame your perspective when you define it, right? So questions you can ask are things like, what gaps are you trying to fill with your customer journey map? What problems are you trying to solve? How will it be used? What's the goal to address the challenges a model can help to discover and understand, right? The underlining goal for you and your organization would be, how are you going to add value? And from there, you can help define it in more description. Next, you want to identify touch points, right? So you want to consider the relationship between actors within the system at play. These touch points are a means of value exchange and shows your interaction between you and the customer. There's normally three types of interactions or touch points that we see. One is a static touch point. So if you think of a static touch point as one that users can't necessarily interact with, they just more of consume it. So if you think of things like advertisements or newsletters, that can be a static touch point. Then you have interactive touch point. If you have an application or website, think of those as your interactive touch point, where you and your customer are able to communicate in a two-way manner. And then the last one is in a human way, right? So if you think about how a customer interacts with your sales department or with your support department, right? That all falls under that bucket. So the touch point is the context around an interaction at a specific time and place. So the system is the experience and the sum of all those touch points and connections between them. You want to be able to optimize across your touch points, and that's really a strong predictor of your business health. As you get through maturing your customer journey map, and this may not happen in your first iteration of your journey map, but beyond in future iterations, you'll identify ways to optimize touch points and really drive value for your customer in the sense, and that'll pay dividends. It'll in turn, we see things like higher revenues, better retention of customers, as well as positive word of mouth, all stem from the ability to optimize your touch points with your customer base. So defining moments of truth. What are moments of truth? These are critical points in an experience that elicit an emotional reaction from your customers during them, right? And they essentially make or break your relationship with your customer. So if you're looking for those moments that ignite emotion, right? So you want solutions that address those moments, and those will turn into monetizable moments as well. So people will pay for services that address critical needs that turn into positive moments of truth, right? And if you're addressing the pain points they see during those moments, that's a really critical way to acquire and retain customers. Those points of opportunities are critical as well for innovation and growth. So if you're zeroing on a pain point, that might be a way for you to drive innovation with a service offering or with a product offering and drive growth of your business. You want to be able to visualize those pain points to understand how your customers do the job today and how they feel while doing it. So visually mapping out the steps customers take to achieve an outcome helps to assign a customer emotion to each step. So the goal really is to develop that empathy from within. As well as an individual perception of an organization is the sum of all the moments of truth together. So it could be moments of delight, which makes all your customer super happy and proud to be have you as a vendor. But if it's if all those sum of the moments of truth is painful, then that could essentially be a death by 1,000 cuts and would see you essentially lose a customer in the long term. You want to focus on those moments to allow you to concentrate energy on the experiences that matter and center essentially around moments of truth or that idea of that aha moment. Customer journey maps help to provide insight into those moments across the time. And so we talk about this chronological order timeline that allows you to design a more cohesive solution that helps to reduce volatility. Using a product or service is normally, I would say, the second moment of truth. The first comes with the customer deciding that they want to buy or solve a certain pain that they're having, and then they go through that buying process. So the first moment of truth is that a customer becomes aware of a product or a service. And then lastly, when you want to drive results, you want to focus on creating value for both customers externally, and that will in turn drive value for you internally. So diagrams help to foster solutions around value-centered design at all levels. Ideally, you want to map your current state journey and then your ideal journey or your future state and identify the steps needed to get from your ideal state to your future state. Focus on change. We really want to get to that future state, programatize it, and create short and long-term plans to complement. Focusing on short-term wins will help to show your executives and leadership that you're making progress, but driving to a long-term horizon goal will help to really achieve an ideal state of where you want to be to drive optimal value for your customer base. So let's talk about the elements of the customer journey maps. So here I have a customer journey map that was created for a rail experience. And so the basic steps along the path are that customers pass through different points of time of that customer journey, right? And that should be based on the goals or objectives that they see, and not your internal point of view that we mentioned as common mistakes that we see. So goals and problems should be a part of the map, as should be the various stages that a customer goes through. So here at the top, we have depicted the various stages that a customer goes through in this Rail Europe experience. They go through research and planning of their trip. Then they go through a shopping experience, booking, and then these later on travel, right? So as well as we're determining how they're doing that actual action and what the goals are that they see. So that goals can also be referred to at times as wants or needs or expectation. These are about really understanding the different objectives individuals are looking to accomplish at each junction along the path of the customer journey. Touch points are the points of interaction that your customer has with your brand or outside of your brand as they seek to meet their specific goals and needs across different stages throughout the customer journey. A touch point is often the intersection of customer actions with a specific tool or resource. Next, you want to touch on their thoughts and their feelings, right? So those emotions. You definitely want to capture those emotions because people aren't robots, right? I believe most B2B purchasing decisions are really largely made by emotion and not just rationale. So even if their boss are giving them a grid to prove why their decision is rational, they've been influenced a lot by emotional factors that aren't in that grid, like who they trust during that buying process, how they be perceived by their peers, those aha moments by being demoed a certain solution and the cool experiences that they see. You really need to get people to describe how they're feeling at times, and you need to do that through direct interactions with customers. Lastly, the evaluation of the experience, and not just how it made them feel, but or what they were thinking, but how to get customers to rate their experiences at various parts of the journey, right? So we have here qualitative and quantitative insights, as well as takeaways that this organization has deferred from those insights and analysis. And this is where you can start turning your customer journey map into more than just the static one-time exercise, and it becomes more into an operational model, right? So you can include various different types of elements and information types, not just the ones depicted here by example. Some of the elements you can include are things like actions, goals, emotions, pain points, touch points, satisfaction, opportunities, brand perceptions. Again, it's not about defining a single kind of template for a customer journey map, but identifying what are your needs within your organization and what are you trying to accomplish and drive value to, and then creating a customer journey based off of that customer journey map. So let's talk a little bit about how you can drive results in agile development processes using customer journey maps. So they also work with methodologies outside of agile development, but we're really focused on agile development in this slide here. And we can help companies design and deliver better outcomes that use customer journeys, a part of their cadence during that development lifecycle, to design and develop and deliver software. So again, you're mapping out an existing customer journey as a product owner or product manager would. And then after you've mapped out what the existing customer journey looks like, you can then identify where are the areas to improve or provide additional value, and to address pain points as well as growth opportunities. And in that, you would create a future customer journey map. And so ideally, once you've created a future customer journey map, you've identified change needed within your solution, whether it be a product or a service, right? And those can come from, and you identify the change from features, epics, and user stories, which can be developed by your internal team or your development teams to help drive that value to realization. Right? And then essentially the last part of the process is getting customer feedback. And once you get that customer feedback, you can continue to create future customer journey maps to iterate on your process, and you get this loop of continuously adding value. And often we see this agile loop in Scrum teams in the sense of how they sprint along, but it also works on how to get feedback from your market and from your customers in order to create valuable solutions. Next, we want to talk about how to drive results in the enterprise and really focus in on an example here on this customer journey map, right? So here, let's talk about the phases. We have a customer that's going through an awareness phase, then a research phase, consideration, and then finally a process, right? A purchase, sorry. And so this is really focused around buying a solution. And so they have a problem where the key goal is this stage is to really understand the different options available to them and what's valuable to them, and develop a list of questions to ask. And we could call it, and that's within the awareness cycle, right? And so in the touch points phase, we'll see that we've illustrated the emotions or the feelings they have during that research phase, and we've actually mapped it across the entire customer journey map for purchasing here. So you can see that the process starts off fairly positive. They're feeling good. They're doing some research. They're investing in managing investments through a unified mobile advisor experience. Then they start to look at various websites for various solutions for various investment banks here and the mobile solutions that they can provide. But they run into a snag, right? And once they start conducting research using things like Google and review sites, they run into kind of this moment of truth where the research can end quickly if they find a solution right away, or if they don't find a solution that meets their needs right away, they continue to go through this research and consideration, right? So if you're able to capture the customer early on in this process, you're able to optimize your value much more quickly. And you can also see at the bottom of this customer journey map, we've decided to map this process of driving demand and lead generation to an organization's internal processes. And so you'll see shortly how that works. But essentially, over time, the buyer converses with an account representative to get additional information. Once they get into contact with that account representative, they feel a little bit better because they're not feeling so lost in their research of a solution. But then they shortly after meet with an advisor that provides data to them based on their decision criteria, and they may feel like inundated with lots of data at this point. And then during the consideration phase, when they're trying to narrow down on that buying process and really come down to the last, few choices that they want to consider for a solution for their mobile advisor experience, they return to the website of narrowed down lists to review pricing details. So now that they've narrowed down to the 1 to 3 solution offerings that they're considering, they're feeling good to their state that they're in. However, through word of mouth, they start conversing with peers, and they quickly see that the offerings that they're being provided, the offerings that they're considering fall short based on the conversations they're having. So if pricing is equivalent or word of mouth is being used, that could be another moment of truth here. And then finally, when the process ends and when the decision is made to go with a certain bank in their mobile advisor experience, they're ultimately the most satisfied. So really want to focus though in on how we can provide value and map this customer journey map to your internal organization processes, right? So you want to give context to the teams conducting agile development, or even help to give perspective with compliance and link that to business processes. So here we're going to focus in on the lead generation within the awareness phase. And within modeling capabilities within our solutions at Blueprint, we're able to map these high fidelity models and customer journey maps to processes in the back end. And so here you'll see that lead generation process here is mapped to the actual business process internally that the marketing team uses and the sales team to capture that opportunity. And this is captured in full business process notation, and it goes through how they turn that lead generation into a qualified lead, into a opportunity. And we can even go further through the traceability to drive that customer journey map into tactile execution, right? So now we want to take this step within this business process and convert it to a lead opportunity. And here we have our process model again, which shows how we're converting that lead into an opportunity with a solution built in-house. And from the solution built in-house within our IT department, we're able to optimize value, and we're able to do so by generating user stories, acceptance criteria, test cases, and gherkins, all from this process model. So you can quickly see how you can take a customer journey map within this scenario of agile development, and marketing and product managers and development can quickly understand how to take that customer journey interaction and create value within the organization to convert a lead into an opportunity. So you can do this within the solution. You can also do impact analysis to understand how that traces all the way from your high-level map to individual user stories for providing complete traceability. Next, we want to talk about how to coordinate customer journey maps within the enterprise. So the first step with coordinating how to do a mapping exercise is to get executive buy-in, right? You want to convince decision makers back to the effort. You want them to know you want to know the objections and provide evidence and benefits for them so that you can find a champion and run a pilot and create a pitch, right? Ultimately, your pitch should be around a business process specifically and why that executive or leader should invest in your customer journey process, mapping process. Next, you want to convince stakeholders up front to include others in the process, right? So remember, customer journey mapping isn't an exercise for an individual. It really spans all departments across the organization. So you need to convince various stakeholders from other departments to participate. And there can be various roles for them, whether a researcher or facilitator. The goal is to really engage others to collaboratively create solutions around this. So you want to be able to communicate benefits of mapping to get buy-in. You can also decide whether you're going to take a formal versus an informal approach, right? So if we just talked about a scenario of agile development, that could be a very informal, lightweight customer journey mapping process where if you're doing something at a very high level across the organization, like how do we buy and retain customers for a very large bank, that might be a very formal customer journey mapping process, which you might want to invest more time and resources in. Either way, you want to be able to frame the intent clearly and very early on. You want to identify the goals you're trying to achieve with your mapping process, the scope, cost, and the time frame in a very lightweight manner. You also want to consider both current and mapping out both current and future states and realize you can't control everything. You won't be able to design every touch point. There'll be interactions that are totally outside of your control. We talked about you want to be able to decide whether it's a formal versus informal mapping exercise. Then you want to be able to create personas if you don't already have them defined already. Which are the personas you're going to tackle for your customer journey mapping exercise? And for those personas, what are their behavior, their needs, who are they? It really should be a single page, and again, based on data, not based on necessarily on demographics or anything like that. You want to be able to say this is a true picture of what our customers look like. Lastly, you want to be able to estimate the effort and estimate the duration, right? So you can assess resources and estimate the cost. You want to organize all your information and collect your data and conduct research, and then essentially model and visualize the map itself. You want to make sure you have access to internal employees that you need to interview to map the process or the map. And then you want to also be able to recruit customers so you can talk to them directly. And if it's a formal effort that you're trying to do a customer journey map for, then it's normally a good idea to write a proposal and present that to your executive for buy-in and approval, essentially at the end. Kicking off a customer journey mapping effort. So essentially what's required once you've gone through that phase of coordinating. So it's really about 5 steps. You want to be able to research and review existing sources of information. So that can be direct feedback, whether it's from a support portal, product feedback, customer meetings. You want to be able to gather those interactions. You can also target things like market research and analyst reports and industry reports and compile that evidence and group implications and make conclusions, right? You also want to interview internal stakeholders and get all the information from them that they might know about and create a draft map. Include others as well from all the different organizations that customers' touch points interact with. You can concentrate on the creation of the diagram and questions and not the brainstorming of solutions. And start creating your touch point inventory of all the touch points you have with the customer. If you want to conduct research externally, you want to be able to fill in your gaps and your answers, and that arises from the previous step. Next, you want to analyze data, right? So extract findings from interviews and group them by themes, and create flows and groups into a narrative by each. As well as extract quantitative data from your analysis of data, right? So the usage metrics, call center reports, benchmarks, social media. Storyteller can really be used in this sense to help congregate all this data that can help underlie the model of the creation of your customer journey map. And next, it's an iterative process, right? So you'll go through this approach a number of times, and it'll circle back. So once you're done analyzing your data, you can figure out that you might have more questions that arise and go back through the research process. Customer journey mapping, again, is a living, breathing asset within the organization, and it should be treated like such. That's always kept up to date. All right, how do we drive change? So this is the most critical part. Once you've created your customer journey map, you want to essentially drive change within your organization to align and design value for customers, right? As well as holding an alignment workshop with the goals to empathize with the customer, envision a future that provides value, and evaluate ideas quickly and test for quick feedback. So let's talk about this a little bit. So empathizing really is about gaining that outside in view for of the individual's experience, right? And you want that to spread throughout your organization. You want to understand the current experience, assess how well you can support it today, and find opportunities to create unique value. You want to review your map and then have it serve as a hub for the conversation that create a deeper understanding of your experience. And you want to assess these performance, grade how you're doing today, identify moments of truth, and vote on what moments of truth are the most important to your organization, so you can focus on those to drive value and change, right? Identify those opportunities where there's weaknesses, there's gaps, there's redundancies, there may be competitors. You want to envision and imagine a future that provides a meaningful value and aspire to transform. So after gaining empathy from looking at those current state journey maps, you can then envision what a future state could look like, right? And you can go divergent in terms of going wide in terms of ideas and concepts. You want to be able to build on ideas and maps and find alternatives, encourage crazy ideas, be visual, think outside of the box in terms of determining that future state that can provide values. You want to be able to ideate and remove barriers from users and customers and challenge industry assumptions. Don't be afraid to break the mold. You can also create user story maps to help get to that future state. And for those not familiar, user story maps are similar to experience maps in the sense that they help to frame a feature and why you're building a certain capability for a product, and identify benefits and problems and how essentially you're going to solve it over an iteration of time. And helps you map back to the big picture to help illustrate the flow of the solutions, including the joys of the users and the pains they have. And you want to be able to create an MVP strategy in order to get to that future state. So what's the minimum viable solution that you can get, and how do you plan to iterate on in a phase 2 and beyond, right? And it's all about building, measuring your progress, and then learning and iterating on it. And then lastly, evaluating. You want to be able to articulate ideas quickly and test them for immediate feedback. It's okay to make presumptions, and ideally in the end you want to converge on prioritized ideas. You want to articulate those ideas you want to test out. You can use things like wireframes, scenarios, or storyboards to help illustrate them via different models. And then you can test out those ideas with your storyboards and your wireframes that you've just modeled out, whether it be just internally within your organization, asking folks on what they think of concepts, or doing things more formal like focus groups and concept tests to get real feedback from the market. And you won't come out of the workshop with fully developed concepts, right, and that are ready to be implemented. It's going to take time. So make sure you're patient with the process and you treat it really as a process of how you can develop solutions in a valuable iterative manner. And the final step is always to plan experiments and to test hypotheses. And don't be afraid to fail fast and make changes in order to provide value. So that concludes our presentation portion for customer journey maps. Now we'll just jump to some Q&A. So the first question I have is, what's the difference between service blueprint, experience maps, and customer journey maps? So service blueprints are essentially they help an organization, specifically I would say product and R&D, and they're very similar to customer journey maps in the sense that they're derived from service blueprints, and they're both chronological, but service blueprints focus on how a service will be provided, specifying on roles, physical evidence, things like backstage processes and workflows, and the supporting systems or infrastructure. Experience maps focus on the actor as well, but they're similar to service blueprints and customer journey maps. However, they're in a much broader context. Experience maps may not have interaction with an organization. The emphasis is really on the jobs they want to be done around that persona and around behavior and goals. So while there's differences between all three of these models, the importance is not to stick to the definition of what a service map is or a customer journey map or experience map, but go through the process of mapping, understand the needs of your organization, collaborate with stakeholders, and be able to drive change from your exercises and create the map that makes sense for you and customize the tool to fit your audience and your purpose. Next question. Who can make use of a customer journey map? Yeah, it's a good question. So a wide variety of functions within the enterprise can find value in customer journey maps. And the ability to develop empathy for those customers is huge, because then you can drive value via change. So just to name a few off the top of my head, I can think of marketing, sales, product managers, designers. UX designers are very heavy on using customer journey maps. Developers, which are key to get empathy from on how customers use products and services. Support, account management. These are just to name a few personas that are functions within your organization that can get value out of customer journey maps. So I got a question as well. Can we view a journey map at a feature level? So yeah, so this is an interesting question. So journey maps don't necessarily cross features. Journey maps cross how a customer interacts with an organization. So if I jump back to an example here, just give me 1 second. So the customer journey map here, the customer journey map doesn't necessarily cross features per se, but I'll get to that in a moment. You want to be able to focus on how they're interacting within your organization. And then where I say you can add value is adding on to your customer journey map, supporting processes. And this is really where features can arise, right? So here's where we have a lead generation process, but essentially you could have a process here around the usage of a product. So instead of thinking of this as a buying scenario, think of this customer journey map as interacting or using your product. You could have supporting functionality and capabilities here around how that would marquee capabilities that a customer gets value from your product. So if one of the key valuables are that they can drive analytics from your solution, you could have a state here be around that business analytics analysis capabilities, and then be able to link them or map to them in that sense to a feature or capability that you've either modeled out using something like a service blueprint, or in this sense, a feature map or a user story map. And then you're able to trace down to things like epics and user stories and how you've developed that feature to provide complete end-to-end traceability and help to give context to product managers and developers on why they're developing that feature and that capability within your product. All right, so that pretty much wraps up our time for today. I want to thank everybody for joining our webinar. Feel free to, if you have any questions or feedback, reach out to us, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you so much.